The security cameras caught everything. A small barefoot boy, no more than 7 years old, had somehow slipped past the electric gates, the guard dogs, and 3 layers of security to reach the most protected garden in the city. What he did next would change 2 lives forever. The boy began to dance. Not just any dance, but a beautiful, flowing movement that seemed to bring the very flowers to life. His torn clothes fluttered in the breeze as he spun and leaped, his dirty face glowing with pure joy. But here's what made millionaire businessman David Sterling's heart stop when he watched the footage later. His 5-year-old daughter Lily, who hadn't smiled or spoken since the accident that took her mother and left her paralyzed, was pressing her small hands against her bedroom window, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 2 years, she was trying to smile. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. But wait, there's much more to this story than meets the eye. Because what David didn't know was that this wasn't the first time the boy had been there, and the reason he came would shock you beyond belief. Let me take you back to where it all began. 2 years earlier, David Sterling had everything a man could want. His tech company was worth over $2 billion. His mansion sat on 50 acres of the most beautiful land in the state. His wife Elena was the love of his life, and their daughter Lily was their precious sunshine. A bubbly, energetic little girl who filled their home with laughter and dance. Elena had been a professional dancer before she met David. Every evening, she would teach Lily new steps in their grand ballroom. The sound of their giggles would echo through the marble halls as they twirled and spun together. David would often stop his important business calls just to watch them, his heart full of love. "Daddy, look! Mama taught me a new spin!" Lily would call out, her tiny arms stretched wide as she turned in circles, her golden curls bouncing with each movement. "You're going to be even more beautiful than your mama," David would say, scooping her up in his arms while Elena laughed and protested that Lily already was. But happiness, David would learn, can disappear in a single moment. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when everything changed. Elena was driving home from Lily's dance class when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact was so severe that the car flipped 3 times before crashing into a tree. Elena died instantly. Lily survived, but her spine was crushed. The doctors said she would never walk again, never dance again. And worse yet, the trauma had stolen something even more precious: her voice, her smile, her spirit. For 2 years, David tried everything money could buy. He flew the best doctors from around the world to examine Lily. He built a hospital-grade therapy room in their home. He hired the most expensive specialists, bought the latest equipment, and spent millions searching for a miracle. Nothing worked. Lily sat in her wheelchair day after day, staring out her bedroom window at the garden where she used to play. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat unless forced to, and never, ever smiled. The bright, dancing little girl who once filled their home with joy had become a silent ghost. David's heart broke a little more each day. His business partners worried about him. He had lost weight, his hair had turned gray, and his eyes held a sadness that seemed to grow deeper with each passing month. "Mr. Sterling," his head of security, Robert Chen, would say gently, "maybe you should take a break. Get some rest." But David couldn't rest. How could he rest when his little girl was trapped in a world of silence and darkness? The mansion, which once buzzed with life and laughter, became quiet as a tomb. The servants spoke in whispers. The ballroom where Elena and Lily used to dance was locked and covered in dust. Even the gardens, which Elena had loved so much, began to look sad and neglected. Then came that mysterious Tuesday morning that would change everything. David was in his office, staring at financial reports he couldn't focus on, when Robert burst through the door without knocking, something he had never done in 15 years of working for the Sterling family. "Sir," Robert said, his face pale and confused. "You need to see this immediately." "What is it?" David asked, annoyed at being interrupted. "It's Miss Lily, sir. She's at her window, and there's a boy in the garden." David's blood turned ice cold. No one was supposed to be able to get into their garden. The property was surrounded by 12-foot walls topped with electric wire. There were motion sensors, guard dogs, and security cameras covering every inch. A boy? David stood up so fast his chair fell over. "How did he get in?" "Where are the guards?" "That's just it, sir," Robert said, shaking his head in disbelief. "We don't know. One moment the garden was empty, the next moment he was there. The guards never saw him come in. The dogs never barked. It's like he appeared out of thin air." David's mind raced. Was this some kind of attack? Was someone trying to hurt Lily? He had received threats before, angry business rivals, people who blamed him for their failures. Had someone finally found a way to get to his daughter? "Get the security team ready," David ordered, grabbing his jacket. "I want this boy removed immediately, and I want to know how he got past our defenses." "Sir," Robert said quietly, "there's something else. Miss Lily, she's watching him, really watching him. She hasn't moved from her window in 20 minutes. David froze. Lily never watched anything anymore. She would sit by her window, but her eyes were always blank, staring at nothing. The doctor said she had retreated so far into herself that she barely noticed the outside world. "What do you mean, watching him?" "She's pressed up against the glass, sir. Her hands are flat against the window, and she's following his every movement." David felt his heart begin to pound. He ran from his office, through the hallways, and up the grand staircase to Lily's room. What he saw when he opened her door made him stop breathing. Lily was indeed pressed against her bedroom window, but it wasn't just that she was watching. Her little body was moving slightly, as if she was trying to copy what she saw. Her head was tilted to the side, and for the first time in 2 years, there was something alive in her eyes. David crept closer, afraid that any sound might break whatever spell was happening. He looked out the window to see what had captured his daughter's attention. In the center of the garden, near the old fountain that Elena used to love, was a boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. He was thin, too thin, and his clothes were torn and dirty. His feet were bare, and his hair was a mess of dark curls that hung over his eyes. But he was dancing. It wasn't like any dancing David had ever seen. The boy moved like water, like wind, like he was part of the music that only he could hear. His arms flowed through the air as he spun and leapt. Despite his raggedness, despite the fact that he was clearly homeless and probably hadn't eaten in days, his face was filled with pure, absolute joy. And somehow, impossibly, that joy was reaching through the glass to touch Lily's heart. David watched in amazement as his daughter's fingers began to tap against the window, following the rhythm of the boy's dance. Her breathing had changed. It was no longer the shallow, lifeless breathing of the past 2 years. She was taking deep, full breaths, as if she was waking up from a very long sleep. The boy danced for nearly an hour. He seemed completely unaware that he was being watched. This wasn't a performance. It was something much more pure. It was a child expressing joy in the only way he knew how. When he finally stopped, he looked up at Lily's window. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. The boy smiled, a beautiful, gap-toothed smile, and waved. Then, before David could even think to respond, the boy ran to the garden wall and somehow disappeared over it, despite the fact that it was twice as tall as he was. David turned to look at his daughter. Lily was still at the window, her hand pressed against the glass where the boy had been. And then, so quietly that David almost missed it, she whispered her first word in 2 years. "Dance." David's eyes filled with tears. He wanted to rush to her, to hold her, to celebrate this miracle. But something told him to wait, to let this moment belong to her. That night, For the first time since the accident, Lily ate her dinner without being asked. She still didn't speak, but there was something different about her, something hopeful. David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the dancing boy. Who was he? How had he gotten into the garden? And most importantly, would he come back? He found himself hoping desperately that he would. The next morning, David was in his office early, watching the security monitors that showed the garden. At exactly 9 a.m., something impossible happened again. The boy simply appeared near the fountain as if he had materialized out of the morning mist. This time, David was ready. He watched every second as the boy began his beautiful, flowing dance. And upstairs, he knew, Lily was watching too. But as the boy danced, David noticed something that made his heart race. The child was even thinner than the day before. His movements, while still graceful, seemed weaker. It was clear that he was hungry, maybe even starving. David made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of calling security to remove the boy, he did something that shocked everyone in his household. He walked outside through the garden straight toward the dancing child. The boy saw him coming and froze, his eyes wide with fear. David could see that he was ready to run, ready to disappear as mysteriously as he had arrived. "Wait," David called softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "Please don't go." The boy stood perfectly still, like a wild animal deciding whether to flee or fight. David took a step closer. "What's your name?" The boy didn't answer, but he didn't run either. "My name is David," he said gently. "That's my daughter watching from the window up there. Her name is Lily." The boy glanced up at Lily's window, then back at David. "She hasn't smiled in 2 years," David continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But when she watches you dance, there's something in her eyes that I thought was gone forever." The boy's expression softened slightly. "Are you hungry?" David asked. This time the boy nodded, just barely. "Would you like to come inside? We have food, lots of food, and..." David paused, hardly believing what he was about to say. "Maybe you could dance for Lily again? Up close this time?" The boy looked up at the window again. Lily was there, as always, watching. Slowly, very slowly, the boy nodded. As David led him toward the house, he had no idea that this thin, mysterious child was about to reveal a secret that would shake him to his very core. Because the dancing boy knew something about the accident that killed Elena and paralyzed Lily. Something that would turn David's world upside down and force him to question everything he thought he knew about that terrible night. But first, there was the matter of the boy's name and where he had come from, and why he could disappear and reappear like magic. The answers to those questions would lead David down a path he never expected, a path that would end with the most shocking revelation of his life. As they reached the front door of the mansion, the boy stopped and looked back at the garden one more time. Then he whispered something that made David's blood freeze. "I know what really happened to your wife." David's hands trembled as he stared at the small boy standing on his doorstep. The words, "I know what really happened to your wife," echoed in his mind like thunder. How could this homeless child, who couldn't be more than 7 years old, know anything about Elena's accident? "What did you say?" David whispered, his voice barely audible. The boy looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. "Can we go inside first? I'm really hungry, and your daughter is still watching." David glanced up at Lily's window. She was indeed there, her small face pressed against the glass, following their every movement. For a moment, he forgot about the boy's shocking words. Seeing any kind of interest from his daughter was still a miracle to him. "Of course," David said, opening the massive front door. "Come in." The boy stepped into the grand entrance hall, his bare feet silent on the marble floor. His eyes widened as he took in the crystal chandelier, the sweeping staircase, and the paintings that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. I've never been inside a palace before, the boy said softly. It's not a palace? David replied gently. It's just a very big house. What's your name? The boy hesitated for a long moment. Jake, he finally said. My name is Jake. David led Jake through the hallway toward the kitchen, his mind racing. Every step seemed to echo with the boy's impossible claim. How could Jake know anything about Elena's accident? The police had investigated thoroughly. The drunk driver who hit them had been arrested. The case was closed. In the kitchen, the head cook, Mrs. Patterson, nearly dropped her mixing bowl when she saw David enter with the raggedy child. Mr. Sterling, she gasped. Who is this? This is Jake, David said calmly, though inside he felt anything but calm. He's going to be our guest. Could you prepare something for him to eat? Something filling? Mrs. Patterson, who had worked for the Sterling family for 20 years, had never seen David bring home a homeless child. But she had also never seen him look so hopeful since the accident. She nodded quickly. Of course, sir. I'll make a plate right away. As Mrs. Patterson bustled around the kitchen, David sat across from Jake at the breakfast table. The boy's eyes darted around nervously, as if he expected someone to throw him out at any moment. Jake, David said quietly, what you said outside, about knowing what happened to my wife, what did you mean? Jake's expression became very serious. Can I eat first? I haven't had food in 3 days. David's heart clenched. 3 days. This child had been starving, yet he had still found the strength to dance for Lily. Of course. Eat as much as you want. Mrs. Patterson placed a plate piled high with scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and fresh fruit in front of Jake. The boy's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. He began eating with careful small bites, as if he was afraid the food might disappear. Slow down, David said gently. There's plenty more where that came from. As Jake ate, David studied him carefully. Despite his dirty appearance and torn clothes, there was something almost elegant about the boy. The way he held his fork, the way he sat straight in his chair. It was as if someone had taught him proper manners before he ended up on the streets. Jake, David said after the boy had finished half his plate, where are your parents? Jake's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes filled with sadness. Gone, he whispered. I'm sorry, David said sincerely. How long have you been on your own? 6 months, Jake replied, then continued eating. And before that? Where did you live? Jake looked up at him with those strangely old eyes. That's part of what I need to tell you. About your wife. About the night she died. David felt his heart begin to pound again. Jake, you would have been 6 years old when the accident happened. How could you possibly know anything about it? Instead of answering directly, Jake asked a question that made David's blood run cold. Do you know why your wife was driving on Maple Street that night? David frowned. She was coming home from Lily's dance class. She always took the same route. Jake shook his head slowly. No, Mr. Sterling. The dance class ended at 6:30. The accident happened at 8:15. Where was she for almost 2 hours? The question hit David like a physical blow. In all his grief, in all the police reports and insurance claims, he had never thought to ask that question. Elena's dance class for Lily ended at 6:30 every Tuesday. It was only a 20-minute drive home. So where had she been? I don't know, David admitted, his voice shaking. The police never mentioned. The police didn't know to ask, Jake said quietly. But I know where she was, because she was coming to see me. The kitchen fell completely silent. Even Mrs. Patterson, who was pretending not to listen while she cleaned dishes, stopped moving. What do you mean coming to see you? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jake set down his fork and looked David straight in the eyes. My real name isn't Jake. It's Nathan Rivera. My mother was Maria Rivera. She used to clean houses for rich people. One of those houses was yours. David's mind reeled. He remembered Maria Rivera, a kind, hard-working woman who had cleaned their house twice a week for about a year. But that had been over 3 years ago. Your mother worked for us, David said slowly. But that was 3.5 years ago, Nathan finished. She had to stop working because she got sick, really sick. We couldn't afford the medicine she needed, and she was too proud to ask for help. She died 2 years ago. David felt tears spring to his eyes. He remembered Maria as a gentlewoman who always smiled and worked quietly. He had no idea she had been struggling with illness. "I'm so sorry," David said, "but I still don't understand what this has to do with Elena." Nathan took a deep breath. "After Mama died, I ended up in foster care, but the family was not good to me, so I ran away. I was living on the streets trying to survive. One night, about 6 months ago, I was sleeping in the park when I saw a car pull up. A woman got out. It was Mrs. Elena." David's heart stopped beating. "That's impossible. Elena never mentioned—" "She found me sleeping under the pavilion," Nathan continued. "I was cold and hungry and scared. She could have called the police, but she didn't. Instead, she talked to me. She was so kind, just like Mama always said she was. She brought me food and a blanket." David gripped the edge of the table. This couldn't be true. Elena would have told him if she had found a homeless child. Wouldn't she? "She started coming to see me every Tuesday after Lily's dance class," Nathan said. "She would bring me food, clean clothes, sometimes medicine when I was sick. She said she was trying to find a way to help me properly, but it was complicated because I had run away from foster care." "No," David whispered. "Elena wouldn't keep something like this from me." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "She wanted to tell you, Mr. Sterling. She talked about you all the time. But she was scared you might make her call social services, and she knew they would just put me back in a bad home. She said she was working on a better plan." The room began to spin around David. Could this be true? Had his wife been secretly helping this homeless child? "The night she died," Nathan continued, his voice breaking, "she came to see me like always, but something was different. She seemed really excited. She told me she had talked to a lawyer about adopting me legally. She said she was going to tell you that night after Lily went to bed. She said she thought you would understand, that you would want to help too." David couldn't breathe. Elena had been planning to adopt this boy without telling him? "She left my spot around 8 o'clock that night," Nathan whispered. "She was so happy, Mr. Sterling. She was humming as she walked back to her car. She said tomorrow everything was going to be different. She said I was going to have a real family again." Tears were streaming down David's face now. And then she was driving home to tell you about me when that drunk driver ran the red light," Nathan finished. "If she hadn't stopped to help me, if she had just driven straight home from dance class, she would have been safe. The accident would never have happened." The truth hit David like a tsunami. His wife had died because she was coming home to tell him about plans to save this child. If she had never found Nathan, if she had never stopped to help him, she would still be alive. Lily would still be dancing. David looked at Nathan through his tears, expecting to feel anger, to feel rage at this boy whose very existence had led to his wife's death. But instead, all he felt was a crushing sadness and a strange sense of understanding. This was exactly what Elena would do. Of course she would stop to help a homeless child. Of course she would want to save him. It was who she was, kind, generous, always thinking of others before herself. "Mr. Sterling," Nathan said quietly, "I know this is all my fault. I know that if I hadn't been there, your wife would still be alive and your daughter wouldn't be hurt. I've thought about it every day for 2 years. That's why I came here." "What do you mean?" David asked. "I heard about Miss Lily from some other kids on the street. They said Mr. Sterling's daughter was paralyzed and wouldn't speak or smile anymore. I thought maybe if I could make her happy somehow, maybe I could pay back a little bit of what I took from your family." David stared at this small, brave boy who had been carrying such enormous guilt for 2 years. A boy who had lost his mother, been put in a bad foster home, lived on the streets, and still somehow found the strength to try to help the daughter of the man he thought must hate him. "Nathan," David said softly, "you were just a child who needed help. What happened to Elena wasn't your fault." Nathan shook his head. "But if I hadn't been there..." "If you hadn't been there, my wife wouldn't have been the woman I fell in love with," David interrupted. "Elena helped you because that's who she was. She would have done the same thing for any child in need. And you know what?" Nathan looked up at him with hopeful eyes. "She would be so proud to know that you've been trying to help Lily. She would be amazed by your dancing and your kind heart." For the first time since David had met him, Nathan smiled, really smiled. But their moment was interrupted by a sound that made both of them freeze in shock. From upstairs came a noise that David hadn't heard in 2 years, the sound of Lily's wheelchair moving. She was coming out of her room. "She never leaves her room," David whispered in amazement. The sound of the wheelchair grew closer. It was coming down the hallway, toward the elevator that would bring her to the main floor. "She's coming to find us," Nathan said, his eyes wide with wonder. David stood up so fast his chair fell over. His heart was pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. What if seeing Nathan up close broke whatever spell had begun? What if this fragile progress disappeared? The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. And there was Lily, in her small pink wheelchair, looking around the grand hallway with curious eyes that David hadn't seen in 2 years. She spotted them in the kitchen doorway and began wheeling herself toward them. Her movements were weak and shaky. She hadn't used her wheelchair much since the accident, but she was determined. When she reached them, she looked up at Nathan with wonder in her eyes. Then, in a voice rusty from 2 years of silence, she said the words that would change all their lives. "Will you teach me to dance?" Nathan looked at David, tears in his eyes. David nodded, unable to speak. "I can't teach you to dance with your legs," Nathan said gently. "But I can teach you to dance with your heart. Your mama, she taught you that dancing isn't just about moving your feet. It's about feeling the music inside you and letting it out." Lily's eyes filled with wonder. "You knew my mama?" Nathan glanced at David, who nodded encouragingly. "I did," Nathan said. "She was the kindest person I ever met. She told me all about you and how beautiful you danced together." What happened next would shock everyone in the house. Lily began to move her arms, following Nathan's gentle movements as he showed her how to dance from her wheelchair. Her movements were small and uncertain at first, but as Nathan encouraged her, something magical began to happen. Light returned to her eyes. Color came back to her cheeks. And for the first time in 2 years, Lily began to laugh. But this beautiful moment was about to be interrupted by the arrival of someone who would threaten to tear apart the fragile family that was beginning to form. Because David's business partner, who had been trying to have him declared mentally unfit to run his company, had just arrived at the house with a team of lawyers and social workers. And they were about to discover a billionaire, a paralyzed girl, and a runaway foster child dancing together in the kitchen of a mansion. The battle for Nathan's future, and for David's company, was about to begin. And the outcome would be more shocking than anyone could imagine. The sound of expensive cars pulling into the driveway shattered the magical moment in the kitchen. David's heart sank as he recognized the black sedan that belonged to his business partner, Richard Hawthorne. Through the window, he could see multiple people getting out. Lawyers in dark suits, a woman with a clipboard who was clearly from social services, and Richard himself wearing the cold smile that David had learned to fear. "Mr. Sterling," Robert Chen's voice crackled through the intercom system. "Mr. Hawthorne is here with several other people. They're demanding to see you immediately. They say it's about Miss Lily's welfare and... Sir, they have legal documents." David's blood turned to ice. For months, Richard had been suggesting that David was too unstable to run their company. He had whispered to board members about David's obsessive spending on doctors for Lily, his withdrawal from reality, and his inability to make sound business decisions. David had ignored it, thinking Richard was just concerned. Now he realized it had been a calculated attack. "Nathan," David said quickly, "you need to hide. If social services finds you here, they'll take me back to foster care," Nathan finished, his face pale with fear. But Lily, who had been listening with wide eyes, did something that shocked them both. She grabbed Nathan's hand with her small fingers. "No," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in 2 years. "Nathan stays. He's my friend." The front door opened with a bang, and the sound of multiple footsteps echoed through the marble hallway. Richard's voice boomed through the house. "David, where are you? We need to talk immediately." David looked at Nathan and Lily, his mind racing. He could send Nathan away, protect him from being discovered. But looking at his daughter's face, alive and determined for the first time since the accident, he knew he couldn't destroy this miracle. "Stay behind me," David told them both. "Whatever happens, stay together." They walked into the grand entrance hall where Richard Hawthorne stood with his army of lawyers and officials. Richard was a tall, thin man with gray hair and cold eyes that had never held real warmth. Beside him stood a stern woman with a badge that read Child Protective Services, and 3 lawyers carrying briefcases full of legal weapons. "David," Richard said with false concern, "we need to discuss your condition. The board is worried about you. And now we hear you've brought a strange child into your home without proper authorization. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior that proves you're not fit to make decisions." The social worker stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. We've received reports that you may have an unregistered minor in your home. We also have concerns about your daughter's care. May we see both children immediately?" David felt the world closing in around him. Behind him, he could sense Nathan trembling with fear. But then he felt Lily's small hand slip into his, and suddenly he found strength he didn't know he still possessed. "This is my home," David said firmly, "and these are my children, both of them." Richard's eyes narrowed. "David, you can't just claim random homeless children. It doesn't work that way. You're clearly having some kind of breakdown." "The only breakdown here," a new voice said from the doorway, "is your pathetic attempt to steal this man's company." Everyone turned to see Mrs. Patterson standing in the kitchen doorway, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Dr. Sarah Martinez, Lily's neurologist, and behind her was someone David never expected to see again, Detective James Cooper, the police officer who had investigated Elena's accident. "Dr. Martinez," David said in surprise. "Detective Cooper, what are you doing here?" "Mrs. Patterson called us, Doctor," Martinez said, walking into the hall with a warm smile. She was concerned about some visitors who seemed more interested in taking children away than in their actual welfare. Detective Cooper stepped forward, his weathered face serious. "And I came because Mrs. Patterson told me something very interesting. She said a boy named Nathan Rivera was here. I've been looking for Nathan for 6 months." Nathan shrank behind David, terrified. "I didn't do anything wrong." "No, son," Detective Cooper said gently. "You didn't. But I have some things to tell you that are going to change your life." Richard Hawthorne was growing impatient. "This is all very touching, but we have legal business to conduct. David is clearly unfit to run a billion-dollar company, and these children need proper care." "Actually," Detective Cooper said, pulling out a folder, "let me tell you what proper care really looks like." He opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. 6 months ago, I was asked to investigate a case of embezzlement at Sterling Technologies. Someone had been stealing money from the Employee Welfare Fund, money that was supposed to help workers' families in crisis. David's eyes widened. I never heard about any investigation. That's because your business partner here, Detective Cooper pointed at Richard, convinced the board not to tell you. He said it would be too stressful for you while you were dealing with Lily's condition. Richard's face had gone pale. That's ridiculous. I was protecting David. Were you? Detective Cooper pulled out more documents. Because what I found was that Richard Hawthorne had been systematically stealing from the welfare fund for over 2 years. The money that was supposed to help families like Maria Rivera's when she got sick. He took it. The room fell completely silent. Maria Rivera, Detective Cooper continued. Nathan's mother applied for emergency medical assistance from Sterling Technologies' employee fund. She had worked for the Sterling family and qualified for help. But her application was denied by Richard Hawthorne, who had already stolen the money that should have saved her life. Nathan gasped, his small hands clenching into fists. You let my mama die? Richard took a step backward. That's not... I didn't... Oh, but you did, Detective Cooper said grimly. And it gets worse. When Elena Sterling found Nathan on the streets and learned his story, she started her own investigation. She discovered the embezzlement and was planning to expose Richard. That's why she was so excited the night she died. She wasn't just planning to tell David about adopting Nathan. She was planning to tell him that his trusted business partner was a thief. David felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Elena knew about the embezzlement? Dr. Martinez stepped forward with her own folder. Elena came to see me 3 days before she died. She wanted to discuss Nathan's medical history and also to ask about the legal requirements for adoption. But she also asked me something strange. She wanted to know if I thought you were strong enough to handle a major betrayal by someone you trusted. She was going to tell you everything that night, Detective Cooper said. About Nathan, about the adoption, and about Richard's crimes. Richard found out. Richard's face was now ghost white. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. Detective Cooper pulled out a final document. Because Elena was smart, she documented everything. She kept copies of Maria Rivera's denied application, records of the missing money, and even recorded conversations with Richard where he admitted to the thefts. The social worker, who had been listening with growing shock, stepped forward. Mr. Hawthorne, if these allegations are true... They're not just true, Dr. Martinez interrupted. They're provable. Elena left all the evidence with her lawyer, with instructions that it be opened if anything happened to her. Richard Hawthorne's cold mask finally cracked. Elena was going to destroy everything. The company, our partnership, my reputation. I worked too hard to let some bleeding heart woman ruin it all. So you had her killed, David said, his voice deadly quiet. No, Richard shouted. I never meant for her to die. I hired someone to follow her, to find out what she knew. When they told me she was planning to expose everything, I panicked. I knew she always drove home on Maple Street after visiting that boy. I thought if there was an accident, a minor accident, she might be too scared to pursue the investigation. The room erupted in shocked gasps. You arranged the accident, Detective Cooper said, his hand moving to his handcuffs. It wasn't supposed to kill her, Richard screamed. The drunk driver was just supposed to bump into her car, scare her a little. But he was more drunk than we thought, and he hit her too hard, and... Richard's confession hung in the air like poison. David felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced. But before he could move, Nathan stepped out from behind him. You killed Mrs. Elena, the small boy said, his voice shaking with emotion. You killed the only person who tried to help me after Mama died. And you let my mama die too, Nathan continued, tears streaming down his face. She could have lived if you hadn't stolen her medicine money. But then something beautiful happened. Lily rolled her wheelchair forward and took Nathan's hand. Nathan, she said, her voice clear and strong. Mama always told me that the best way to beat bad people is to be extra good. She said that love is stronger than hate. Nathan looked down at her, this brave little girl who had found her voice again, partly because of him. "Will you still teach me to dance?" Lily asked. Nathan smiled through his tears. "Every day, if you want." Dr. Martinez stepped forward with a warm smile. "Actually, I have some wonderful news about that. Lily, the reason I came here today wasn't just to support your father. I've been reviewing your case with a team of specialists, and we believe there may be new treatments that could help you walk again." David's heart stopped. "What?" "The damage to Lily's spine, while severe, may not be permanent. There are new procedures, new therapies. It will take time and work, but there's real hope." Lily's eyes filled with wonder. "I could dance with my legs again?" "Maybe," Dr. Martinez said gently. "But even if not, Nathan is right. Dancing comes from the heart, not just the feet." Detective Cooper was handcuffing Richard, who was still protesting his innocence despite his confession. The social worker had put away her clipboard and was smiling at the scene before her: a billionaire, his daughter, and a homeless boy who had found each other through tragedy and love. "Mr. Sterling," Janet Morrison said, "I think it's clear that Nathan is in good hands here. I'll speak to the family court about making the adoption official as soon as possible." "Adoption?" Nathan asked, his eyes wide with hope. David knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy who had brought his daughter back to life. "Nathan, I know Elena wanted to adopt you, and I know that's what she would want me to do. Would you like to be my son, Lily's brother?" Nathan began to cry, not sad tears, but tears of pure joy. "Really? I can be part of your family?" "You already are," David said, pulling both children into his arms. "You have been since the moment you started dancing for Lily." 6 months later, the Sterling mansion was filled with music and laughter again. The grand ballroom had been reopened and transformed into a therapy and dance studio. Every day, Lily worked with her physical therapists, slowly regaining strength in her legs. And every day, Nathan danced with her, sometimes with her in her wheelchair, sometimes supporting her as she took shaky steps with her walker. David's company was stronger than ever, with the stolen money returned and new policies in place to help families in need. The Maria Rivera Memorial Fund had been established to ensure that no employee would ever again be denied medical help because of someone else's greed. But the most amazing transformation was in the children themselves. Lily grew stronger every day, not just physically, but emotionally. Her laughter filled the house, and she talked constantly about her big brother Nathan and all the things they would do together. Nathan had grown too, no longer the thin, frightened boy who had appeared in their garden. He was healthy and happy, excelling in school and still dancing with a joy that amazed everyone who saw him. One evening, as David watched Nathan teaching Lily a new dance move in the ballroom, he felt a presence beside him. He couldn't see Elena, but he could feel her warmth, her approval, her love. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty air. "Thank you for bringing him to us." A gentle breeze moved through the ballroom, even though all the windows were closed, and David could swear he heard Elena's voice carried on the wind. "Love always finds a way." Nathan looked up from his dance with Lily and smiled at David. "Dad, want to dance with us?" David Sterling, billionaire businessman, walked onto the dance floor and took his children's hands. Together, the three of them danced, not perfectly, not gracefully, but with pure love and joy. And in that moment, David realized that Elena had gotten her wish after all. She had saved Nathan, brought him into their family, and through his gift for dance, he had saved them all. The homeless boy who danced for a paralyzed girl had given them all something precious: hope, love, and the chance to be a family again. Sometimes, the most beautiful miracles come in the smallest, most unexpected packages. And sometimes, when all seems lost, Love really can dance its way into your heart and change everything. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to support our growth and see more incredible true stories like this one.